So Unearthed Arcana 6 just came out with some new information about a whole bunch of classes, but most relevant to Asians represent is the monk. So Jackie joined me for just a quick sort of first reaction to what is, again, not set in stone, the latest build of the 5th edition or revised 5th edition, or it's not 1D&D anymore. It's revised D&D
No,
monk,
it's
something like that.
yeah.
Who knows
Hmm.
what they're calling it at this point, but the monk, we have our eyes on the monk right now. And I wanted to
Hmm.
provide a little bit of context to our conversation. Back in the D&D summit, uh, I asked Jeremy Crawford about the monk and what it would look like. And Jeremy said that essentially they're trying to move away from the Asian coded nature of the monk. And they're going to basically try to bring more non-European representation to, which is so weird to say, to every class. And in doing so, they wanted to no longer make the monk the default Asian class. And they had originally changed key to spirit points, but that has since changed in Unearthed Arcana 6 with this new monk. So, for context, they wanted to make it not the Asian class. Thoughts on that for the new monk?
So I love how they go, well, we don't want it to be Asian coded anymore, but we also don't want it to be non-European. And then you're like,
Then what
where
is
do we
it?
you where do you what do you have left then? Like what do we have left then?
Exactly.
Then don't call it a monk anymore. Stop calling it a monk.
I honestly, I will stand by this. I think it should be the martial artist. I think it should be the martial
Yes.
artist. And I think that they should have a path for it, like your discipline, which is the use of the word
That's
discipline
a
is a whole other
so
thing. But
so much of the use of the word. Oh my god.
whatever path you take for your martial artist, one of them could be the sort of like Shaolin monk. Um,
Hmm.
and the others can be, you know, whatever you want. It could be the abbot, it could be the brawler, the gladiator, that whole thing. Um,
Hmm.
but it really doesn't look like they've made any of these changes to the monk. It's still coded as Asian in my mind.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
but they've put some language in there that basically makes it feel like the how do I say it? It makes it feel like they're trying to take away some of the Asian coded nature out of it.
Yeah, but it's very surface level.
Yeah,
It's not even like rudimentarily like it's not even core because again, I think the problem is they put themselves in the situation where they want this version of D&D to also be backwards compatible, which then leads you into a problem of okay, well what can you keep what can you keep? And the answer is you have to keep most of it because
you have to keep.
otherwise it's
Yeah,
not
you have
back
to keep most of it,
you
and
can't that's the folly of this entire revised edition that I'm still pinning on is like the fact that they are committing to making it backwards compatible means that they are putting themselves in positions where design wise they are limiting themselves in ways that they do not understand yet.
absolutely, and this is the same scenario that we always talk about on the podcast when it comes to reviving old campaign settings like Karator.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it's even more difficult when you're trying to make it mechanically compatible with this old
Mm-hmm.
5th edition D&D. I mean, with the description of the monk, they say monks use rigorous combat training and mental discipline, the word discipline there, to align themselves with the multiverse. They're really leaning on this multiverse thing as well. Um, and tap into internal reservoirs of power. So instead of making it this chi thing, they
Mm-hmm.
are now calling it, it's whatever you want it to be. Each monk has a different way of describing it. It could be, as they say, breath. You're welcome. That's from Candlekeep Mysteries. It could be
Yeah.
breath, energy, life force, essence, or self, for example. So it could be anything. And they channel this into their attacks. But core to this is the idea of discipline, martial discipline. So at second level, you get chi, just like you would in 5th edition right now. But instead, you get
Mm-hmm.
martial discipline. and you get discipline points. And you spend these discipline points to use your martial discipline features. And the use of the word discipline baffles me.
It's a very odd choice of words
Baffles me.
because like if you're thinking from from even just like a casual like martial artist like vantage point, like even if you're like not even like a real martial, even if you never practice
The
martial
word
arts,
discipline is like what
discipline,
kind of martial art you practice?
well, it's a type of it's a type of thing, and because when you're referring to discipline, you're referring to a type of thing. Because even when you talk about like other trades, when you say it's a discipline of this, it's like, well, it's a different kind of trade. So it's a weird choice to call it as discipline. It vaguely reminds me of when Diablo 3, the hunter was used also this reservoir call discipline as well, and I was just like, why are we using it this way?
I know, and it just linguistically it's really weird because it's a class. You have it literally in the text it says your self discipline and martial training allow you to harness a well of extraordinary energy within yourself. Your access to this energy is represented by a number of discipline points. Whenever I hear somebody say martial arts discipline or martial discipline, I think, well, what kind of martial arts do you
Mm-hmm.
practice? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like a Muay Thai practitioner or an Aikido practitioner. Like what discipline do you use? Even within a
Yeah,
culture's martial arts, you have different disciplines.
yeah.
And
And
it's
it's the
weird.
same monk package. It's flurry of blows, patient defense, step of the wit. So it's
Exact same
like
thing.
it's trying to insinuate that like there's like a generic like part of martial arts where it's like it's always the same. It's like, and if you actually study martial arts, you're like yes and no, because there
Yeah,
are
it's like
some.
they basically did punch, block, and strafe,
Yeah,
jump, dodge.
yeah,
That's what they did.
yeah, like it's like okay, it's very rudimentary in that regard, but I still feel like, but the word discipline is just throws the whole meaning off. Like I could have, if you didn't want to connect with like the spiritualism or the religious parts of like spirit of the using the term spirit, I could have been fine with reservoir points. I think reservoir points still
Re-
sounds better,
Reservoir
or
points.
something, or
he-
something else.
here's my thought, right?
Yeah.
I think the problem with discipline is that you use the word discipline throughout the entire
Hmm.
monk class and it just becomes your new honor, right?
Yeah,
But
it does.
to say I want to spend discipline points to use my discipline features is just awkward to say. In my mind,
Hmm.
I would have, and they wanted, and you could tell they wanted to move away from ki or chi because they're like,
Hmm.
well, we don't want to make it Asian, but they
Right.
made the easiest possible decision, right? They could have kept it
Hmm.
as ki or chi, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
really leaned in hard and made this
Yeah.
Asian coded class, and then hired Asian writers and designers to work on it, right? It could have been
Hmm.
good that way. Um,
Yeah.
or instead of discipline, they could have called it focus,
Focus would have also been a good
right?
one. Yeah.
Because spellcasters have their arcane focus. You,
Hmm.
as the monk, are your focus. They talk about this whole
Mm.
like you are perfecting your body. You have focus points, and you spend
Hmm.
focus to use martial techniques,
Yeah. Yeah. Makes
right?
sense.
But
And
it seems
as
so easy.
combat goes, you lose more, and you spend more focus. You lose more focus because the longer the battle goes, the more fatigue you get. So it's like it makes sense.
It makes sense, right? You start off with a ton of focus and you use it for these techniques. And like you said,
Hmm.
narratively, it also makes sense when during the battle, you are spending all of your focus to use these techniques. I
Yeah.
I don't know why they did that. The other thing that has always bothered me about the monk has been how they approach weapons, right?
Hmm.
Because on this one, they say at first level, what do you get as a monk? Okay, you get martial arts, and hey, it's a d6 damage. That's pretty great, right? Martial arts, unarmored defense, and weapon mastery. And weapon mastery in this means it says your training with weapons allows you to use the mastery property of two kinds of simple weapons of your choice. When you finish a long
Yeah.
rest, you can change the kind of simple weapons you choose. For example, you could switch to using the mastery properties of maces or slings, which I really feel like is their not so obvious way of saying, hey, let's try to get people to use weapons that they normally don't use. But
Yeah. Yeah,
that it
it's their
bothers
play
me.
on weapon styles. It's their play on the old weapon styles mechanic that they used to have in like the other martial classes.
Yeah.
And I get it. It sounds neat, but I think the weirdest thing ever is that when you look at like it's if you look because martial arts is still mostly still the original text, so it still says simple weapon. Where I just when I first saw that it just said because like bonus unarmed strike it says when you use an attack action to with an unarmed strike or a simple weapon in your turn,
Yeah.
you can make another unarmed attack strike. But the problem I'm having with it is like if I'm a monk and I have like weapon mastery on things, shouldn't I be able to learn how to integrate my unarmed attacks with my weapons of choice? Like because that would signify that I have some understanding of harmony of how to balance my weapons with
Your
my
weapons
fighting
should be an
style.
extension of
Right.
your body, right? Because I think of
Yeah.
like eskrima, like arnis, like knife fighting and stick fighting. They are
Yeah.
extensions of your limbs, right? Another
Mm-hmm.
thing is that when you look at the monk, their proficiencies are in simple weapons. And is this like
Yeah.
this thing kind of bothers me, and I get why they do it for balance purposes, because then it would just make it the
Mm-hmm.
fighter, though in my opinion the fighter and the monk could probably just be combined into the same thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, you're a martial artist, you only use simple weapons. But then you look
Yeah.
at, you know, Chinese martial arts
Yeah.
and all like the meteor hammer, they've got really intricate weapons. Simple weapons kind of downplay the fact that, weaponry is an extension of martial arts practice.
Mm-hmm.
And to have the monk only use simple weapons has always been strange to me.
Yeah. I think because when you think about like real like when you think about martial art, when you think of monks, when you're trying to even if you divorce like all the religiosity, the spiritualism, and you just keep it as like a traditional martial artist, right? It's like why would it just be simple weapons? It's
Exactly.
like it makes no sense. And again, it's like a core aspect of like the tropes that were designed early on from older versions of D&D that just carried over, and no one ever bothered to really address it, and it looks like they still won't be addressing it.
Yeah, and they've just kind of kept it as the same thing. And like, with the rest of the rest of the monk abilities are pretty much the same. There's nothing
Yeah.
really new about it. And the biggest changes have honestly been with weapon mastery, which you see across all of the classes, which can bring a lot of interesting depth to the monk.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that is not necessarily problematic, but mostly just kind of annoying, is this idea of discipline.
Yeah.
It's the idea of discipline. Spirit points, I'm like, okay, cool. You have this generic sort of like chi, but not chi, key, but not key. But discipline,
Mm-hmm.
just make it something generic like focus. That's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at right
Like the fact that discipline's also used in like other class features further down the list. Like it go they changed like Diamond Soul to Discipline Survivor. They
now. Yep.
changed what was it, Perfect Self to Perfect Discipline. I'm like, just calm down
Yeah.
with calm down with the usage. Like you really could have spent more. It feels like it's like a very this is like a very very loose band-aid that they're trying to put on the whole concept that they're going for, like what they're trying, like their aim.
Yeah.
And I get it, but also just going you really could just really spend a little bit more effort to rename, like choose better words than discipline.
I also
Like
think that discipline kind of down, and maybe even focus does the same thing. It really downplays
yeah.
the fact that you are trained at harnessing this energy, right? Because if you
Mm-hmm.
look at, warrior of shadow, right? That's your sort of
Yeah.
new monk sort of your school, right? Except in this
Right.
case it's your martial discipline. But if
Yeah.
you look at the warrior of shadow, which is supposed to be what was that one previously?
It was called the Way of Shadow.
Way of
That's what it used
shadow,
to be
right?
called.
Um,
Right. And it's like they're kind of innocuous, like shinobi kind
you're
of
the
act like
ninja.
Yeah, you're like the ninja, like you're more like the shinobi because the shinobis are supposed to be like, using ninjutsu and sort of thing. So it's
Yeah,
gonna be
and
like
you
some.
spend discipline points to at third level, you get shadow arts and you spend discipline points to cast darkness. And for me, it's
Yeah.
just like that's just straight up magic, right? So like
Yeah.
I feel like they could have stuck with I honestly think spirit points is actually better than discipline at this point.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like Spirit Point would have been fine because it's still a part of you're using yourself. You're
Yeah, and
channeled
it's
through
still
yourself.
culturally agnostic,
Yeah,
which
like
is the
yeah.
goal that Jeremy Crawford said, right? They wanted
Mm-hmm.
it to be
Yeah.
sort of not
They
coded as Asian.
yeah, because like honestly, Spirit works better than Discipline in my opinion. And
Yeah,
like if you're gonna stick to being like removing yourself culturally agnostic, like I think that's a better one because when you put discipline, you're now sending the message of you're not even just making it culturally agnostic, you're trying to divorce it from the religious inner spiritualism that is connected to monks in its entirety. At that point, it's like you might as well just call it a martial artist and then just merge it into the fighter
make it
and
a yeah,
call it a day.
make it a
Because
subclass. Totally.
because like a martial artist is different than like what like the interpretation of like an individual who uses and utilizes like spiritual energy, right?
Yeah,
And it's like they can be martial artists, but it's not like but if you want to define it differently, then you should. In this case, it's like it's still stuck where it was before, where it's like a weird blend of two things, and it just has a hard time. It's just having an identity crisis still.
absolutely. Identity crisis is a really good way to put it. It's just going to be the language using discipline is going to be awkward. I'm thinking about, if we were playing a game and I'm like, oh, I'm all out of discipline. I'm just real
I'm
rowdy
not
right now.
disciplined
I'm
anymore.
not
I'm not
disciplined
disciplined
anymore.
anymore.
And like you could say like I'm out of focus. Like I've lost
Yeah.
focus. I've lost
Hmm.
center. But
Hmm.
discipline is just an awkward way to describe this action economy that the monk has.
Yeah.
When I look at the
Yeah.
warrior of elements, which is basically just the avatar, it's like,
It
ah,
still
it
is.
still is the avatar, but like, I must spend discipline to create, to use my fire ability, right?
Hmm.
I just think that because it's very much described as magical, lean in with it, right?
Yeah.
And spirit points was the most culturally agnostic way to have done it. Um,
Hmm.
but
I agree.
overall impressions of the monk. Overall impressions of the monk. From my end, I think they haven't taken a lot of steps forward, but they haven't necessarily taken any steps backward. If
Right.
anything, this new monk is just kind of awkward to use because of the word discipline. And I think that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be making a ton of South Park jokes and being like, oh, you rack discipline. And
Yeah.
it's going to suck.
It's I already we were already talking about it privately today.
Exactly.
We were already going, yep, the meme is right there. It's just really right there. You can't avoid it.
Yeah,
And and the thing is, like when I looked at it today, I was trying to look at it from every aspect, both what is written and what their aims are, what also mechanically they've changed too, because there's some mechanical changes in every section.
of course.
But fundamentally, it's there's like aspects to it where it's just like they're basically where they are. They can't go too far forward with this because they have to be backwards compatible. So you're stuck in a place where you can't advance it. You can't make those big changes that you probably want to make because otherwise you might as well have just say to yourself, "We're making a brand new edition of the class," and just do
It's just
that.
it's the same sort of thing. They have just made some subtle changes with a weird, awkward language
Yeah,
change. So those were my thoughts.
yeah.
So what are your
Mhm.
thoughts overall on the monk?
I feel like overall it's thematic. Like I will say, like it still reads as if somebody who has written this has no firm understanding of martial arts in any culture, like not just the Asian culture, like even like their European centric ones. It's like it's like please, there's a part of me that's just like I know it's not necessary, but it's just like it feels like someone still does not understand the grip of what it means to practice martial arts in a certain capacity, and so it's lacking in that. And I feel like maybe they should have hired a real consultant who practices martial arts from like multiple cultures, and that might be a good way to look at it. Like, okay, what does it really mean to be a person who disciplines their body and mind to a honed edge?
Yeah,
Like,
and hey, look, it would have been cool if they, said, you know what, monks aren't just about martial arts, and added,
right.
maybe some clerical inspiration, especially if they wanted
Mhm.
to also take some European inspiration.
Yeah,
When I tweeted that we were
absolutely.
going to talk about this, there were a lot of Monty Python memes there
Yeah, yeah,
too.
because that's the original. That's what the term monk really came from. Is from the Anglo-Saxon term. Like, so it's like, come on, y'all. Like, if you're not going to lean in the European part and you have to still the name, how are you going to work with this? Like we said before, they're trying to remove it from both the cultures that they are literally tied to, and it's like okay, but where are we left with then? And it's like nowhere. And now we're stuck. And now, like I said, it's an identity crisis. We don't know what to call. We don't know what this is.
In
It's still the same thing.
Still the same thing, in my opinion. It is still um an Asian inspired martial artist with
Yeah.
minor linguistic changes that make it even more awkward to play. They've done nothing to sort of broaden our understanding of what a monk could be,
Mm-hmm.
other than saying, yeah, combat training and mental discipline. They have done
Yep.
nothing mechanically to distance it from the Asian martial artist, other than say, instead of
Mm-hmm.
spending ki, you spend discipline to
Right. Which
use discipline features. And to me, I just find it awkward to use at the table. And I think,
yeah.
and again, this is again, this is an unearthed arcana. So
Mm-hmm.
this isn't set in stone. Expect changes, and this is a good opportunity for us to provide WotC with feedback about this.